All right, we're still talking about angles. Now we're in section 1.5 and we're going to talk about angle relationships. And specifically, when we say relationships, we mean pairs. Okay, so there's going to be two angles together. There's 5 angle pairs that we're going to talk about today, so we're going to do them one at a time, and then we're going to talk specifically about 2 of them in a little more detail. So angle pairs is just 2 angles. So the first kind are called adjacent angles. Okay, adjacent angles, and they look like this. And we'll go ahead and label these. This will be angle 1 and angle 2. So these are definitions we're writing down. We're just making them a little more visual for you to see them. So adjacent angles are 2 angles with a common vertex and a common side. So we really want to get comfortable with this vocabulary. So this is our common vertex, and this is our common side. We need to get comfortable with the word common and finding sides and vertex and things like that. So adjacent angles, two angles with a common vertex and a common side. All right, our next type of angle pair is called a linear pair. So linear pair. A linear pair looks like this. We have angle 1 and angle 2. So a linear pair is very special, very specific. It's 2 adjacent angles. So notice the one we just did was adjacent angles. So linear pairs are also adjacent angles, but they're a specific type. 2 adjacent angles, and their non-common sides form opposite rays. That is a fancy way of saying that a linear pair is 2 angles that are on a line together. Okay, so remember the picture. That's what we're looking for with a linear pair. The next type of angle pair are called vertical angles. And the word vertical is a little misleading here because it implies that something's happening straight up and down. Vertical angles are not vertical. It's just the word that's used. So vertical angles look like this. So draw a line and then draw another line that intersects it like that. So we're going to label all of the angles in this picture. So 1, 2, 3, 4 angles. So vertical angles are 2 non-adjacent angles. So 2 non-adjacent angles formed by intersecting lines. Okay, so vertical angles are very easy to spot because we see them right here. We have 2 intersecting lines, and the vertical angles are angle 1 and angle 3, and angle 2 and angle 4. So what you're looking for with vertical angles is 2 angles that are formed by intersecting lines that are not adjacent to each other, but they're across from each other. So 1 and 3, or 2 and 4. Those are vertical angles. All right, 2 more types, which you may have heard before. The first one is complementary angles. So complementary angles. Okay, those are 2 angles, and we're going to start writing a little more shorthand as we learn this stuff. So instead of writing the word angles over and over, I'm going to make an angle symbol and put an S in it. That means angles. That's a widely accepted way to write the word angles in math. So you'll see that as you move on into higher math and into college. So two angles whose measures have a sum of 90 degrees. All right, so that means two angles that add up to 90 degrees. So we're going to draw a couple of examples of what that looks like. So here's our first example. This will be angle A and angle B. All right, now if we are told from the start that angle A is 50 degrees and angle B is 40 degrees, well, the measure of angle A plus the measure of angle B equals 90 degrees, because 50 plus 40 is 90, right? So that's one way you might see complementary angles. You see two angles and they'll say one of them is 50, one of them is 40, and then you'll figure out that they add up to 90. Another way that you're going to see them is you'll actually see a right angle like this, 90 degrees. And then it's going to be split, not evenly, just split into two angles, angle 1 and angle 2. So we would say here that the measure of angle 1 plus the measure of angle 2 equals 90 degrees. Now we don't know what angle 1 and angle 2 are, but they know they add up to 90. So that's complementary angles, and that's the way you might see them. The next type of angle, the last type of angle, are called supplementary angles. All right? Supplementary angles are two angles whose measures have a sum of 180 degrees. So very similar, right? Except one adds up to 90, the other one adds up to 180. So ways you might see that. You might see two angles. Angle A, angle B. And angle 1, or angle A, is 120 degrees, and angle B is 60 degrees. Well, when we look at that, we see 120 plus 60 is 180. So the measure of angle A plus the measure of angle B equals 180 degrees, because 120 plus 60 equals 180, right? We can prove it. Another way that you're going to see them is as a linear pair, which maybe you already thought about. So we have a linear pair, they look like this, right? So angle 1 and angle 2. Well, this is a straight angle along the bottom. So hopefully you see that the measure of angle 1 plus the measure of angle 2 equals 180 degrees. So you might see them connected, you might see them disconnected. So those are our 5 types of angle pairs. So the last two things we're going to write down are two theorems, and these are really important and really not that hard to learn. So the first one is called the linear pair theorem. And we pretty much just did it right up here when we drew this picture and we said that they add up to 180. But now we're going to write it down as a formal theorem, so something that we know and we can always use now. So if two angles form a linear pair, then they are supplementary. And the linear pair theorem says that in this picture, which is basically the same picture we just drew, the measure of angle 1 plus the measure of angle 2 equals 180 degrees. So this is an important one. You want to write that down. linear pair theorem. Put a box around it, star it in your notes. We need to memorize it. The other theorem is called the vertical angles theorem. All right, vertical angles theorem. And it's simple. It says that vertical angles are congruent. Right? Simplest theorem you're ever going to see. So we're going to draw a quick picture of some vertical angles. Remember, they're formed by two intersecting lines, and they're the non-adjacent angles. So that's angle 1 and angle 3. So angle 1 is congruent to angle 3, and angle 2 is congruent to angle 4. Or we could say, if we were doing a math problem and solving something, the measure of angle 1 equals the measure of angle 3, and the measure of angle 2 equals the measure of angle 4. And remember, congruent and equal pretty much mean the same thing, but when we're writing about stuff, if we're talking about the angles, we say congruent. If we're writing about their measurements, we say equals. So just a little note, so memorize linear pair theorem, vertical angles theorem, and you will be good to go for geometry. See you tomorrow.